Brew Strong is brought to you by Blickman Engineering, home of the Riptide. Visit them online at blickmanengineering.com.
Brewers, it's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think, Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy, hey, my brewing brothers and sisters.
Greetings, cretins.
It's good to be back.
It is. It's I've had to carry the load of my own for a couple shows. Well, Justin helped, of course, but
Yeah,
missed you, buddy.
you were handling the load.
Yep.
The show has always been a load. People tell me all the time, that show is such a load. They seem oddly appreciative, though.
Yeah, everyone likes a good load.
Yeah.
I tried my best, my very, very best hey, howdy, hey impressions for most of the shows, and I just, not even close, Jay-Z.
Well, it's...
the spirit was willing.
15 years of hey, howdy, hey. So
right.
It's practice. Practice makes perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, everybody will be happy to have you back in the studio, I'm sure of it, Jay-Z.
Yeah, quite possibly. I've been quite touched by the number of people who've said that they missed me on the show, and Liz was telling me just this morning, somebody down in Camp Pendleton was saying how he missed me on the show, and so the one listener he made it known.
Oh, nice.
Right. No, and I tell you, I miss everyone too. I haven't had a chance to really be around everybody for a while, and I was in Providence Tuesday morning, ready for the conference, and then Liz texted me, and I just finished texting with Blickman saying, yeah, I'm here for the conference. I'll see you. We're like, we'll get together, and then I was just gone. I'm sure he was like, where the hell? He said he was going to be here.
Yeah.
And Liz got sick. She texted me. She's like, I'm in the emergency room. I need surgery.
Oh, dear.
I was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So I got on a plane and left. So I missed the whole conference again.
Yeah, you guys have had a rough go of it the last couple months over there at the Zainasheff family.
Since November.
Yeah, really?
November, I got sick.
Okay.
December, my sister unexpectedly died.
Oh, God. Wow.
And then, I just got worse and worse health as they tried to figure out what the hell was going on.
I'm so
and it
sorry.
wasn't until April that they figured it out. And I was like, I was telling Liz, I'm like, if they don't do something, I'll be dead by 4th of July.
Oh, gosh.
And so then they started treating me with steroids, which are making me all jumpy, but, it's keeping me alive.
Yeah. Well, we want that.
Well, yeah.
Not all, maybe not you.
It's 50-50.
Yeah, depends on the day.
Right, yeah. But I missed seeing our dear friend John Blickman. I missed seeing all the cool stuff that he brings to the Homebrewers Conference.
Oh, yeah? It was a good one this year.
Every year, he always has something new and unusual, and some clever thing that he's working on. They've got all their homebrew line, and then the Anvil series, which is the more I don't want to say just durable,
lower price point, but very durable.
Workhorse type of equipment without any frills, the no frills kind of line, right?
The everyman line.
The everyman line, and then the pro line for those of you that are going professional, or they've been working on, and it's the way Blickman Engineering does everything with quality and a good dose of genius thrown in there, I think so. Everybody should check them out. They sponsor the show, have for a long old time. I don't know why. Maybe Blickman likes a good load too. But check them out at blickmanengineering.com. Blickman with a B and there's like an N or something in there. And a .com. So check them out, and if you appreciate the show, make sure to send an email to our good friend John Blickman at feedback@blickmanengineering.com. All right, so today we were going to talk about the difference between late and dry hopping.
That's right. Yep.
I mean,
talk a little bit about which is which and what does what.
Right, because a lot of times there's confusion. People are still talking about first wort hopping and boil hops, and at least at Heretic when we're making like hazy IPAs, it's like no, there's no boil hops. we don't use those. That's old technology. Why waste hops in there? And so we've moved everything to the whirlpool and to the dry hop. So it's kind of late whirlpool and dry hop. That's the only two things we use in the vast majority of the beers we're making today.
Which I just found interesting, the progression of this, because early in the Brewing Network, you very often started talking about shifting toward late hops, but you weren't eliminating boil hops at that time.
Right.
It was but this progression, and then it kept being more late hop, and now you're saying now there won't even be boil, and so I just found not only the progression interesting and fascinating, but that now really a distinction has to be made between what is a late hop, what is a dry hop, what are the differences,
right,
and what do you get out of those things.
Well, and now I can't remember what I was...
For this, Jay-Z. We're here for you, buddy.
Right.
While you get back on the saddle.
Yeah. Saddles are fun. I enjoy riding.
Now, Palmer, you've been talking about this at different events too. This is a topic that's come up for you recently, quite a bit.
Yeah. It's I've been doing hops talks in South America a bit. Just did, and in what do they call it, Mundo. They're going to kill me. Anyway. But great festival. Had a really good time.
Between the two of you.
Between the two of us old men. You're just not going to get much. But now I've decided I need to take notes when I have these thoughts. No, what I was going to say was, one of the things that affected that was the Can You Brew It series. When I was talking to all these the professional brewers and getting their exact techniques, one of the things I learned was, how long was their hot stand in the whirlpool? How long did it take them to knock out? That really affected, because the wort is hot, and what temperature they were holding it at made a big difference in the bittering that we were going to achieve in the beer. And because of that, when I did the recipes for those shows, I would always adjust the amount of time, or when the home brewer we were having brew the beer added the bittering hops. And by doing that, we were able to match up almost every time. It was fundamentally one of the biggest things that made it difficult to match those up. It was the timing of these late hops, these whirlpool hops, and of course the ingredients. And once we figured that out, it was like, there you go. And so that was a big change for me in my way of thinking as to where bittering comes from, and why late hops are important, and dry hopping and the perception of bitterness. So there you go. I actually remembered it.
All right, just keep taking notes.
I remembered it good. Wrote it down.
Well, you want to take a break and let Palmer walk us through the start of it?
Yeah, let's take a short break, and when we come back, John, you'll take us into, we love starting with a definition first. But
there we go.
We'll have that right after this.
Are you looking for a simple brewing system that's great for all grain brewing, but everything on the market seems to be full of compromises? Blickman Engineering has the answer. The Blickman Brew Easy All Grain Brewing System. The Brew Easy is a complete system with easy upgrades and a beautiful compact design, perfect for any size brewing location. At its core, the Brew Easy is built on 2 gorgeous Blickman Boilermaker brew kettles, a high-temperature March pump, and either a top-tier gas burner or the new Boil Coil electric heater. The Brew Easy adapter lid allows the pots to stack on top of each other, forming an efficient, strong, and compact brewing setup that comes in 5, 10, and 20-gallon batch sizes. Upgrade your Brew Easy system with full automated control by adding a Blickman Tower of Power temp controller, and make moving around easy with the Blickman Kettle Cart. The Brew Easy is modular. If you already own a Boilermaker kettle, you can build your Brew Easy by purchasing just the modules you need. The new Brew Easy all-grain brewing system. See it today at BlickmanEngineering.com and brew with Blickman quality on your new Brew Easy.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew strong.
All right, we're back. We're talking late hopping and dry hopping, the difference between and the importance of these methods of hopping, I guess. John, can you give us some quick definitions of what late hopping is, whirlpool hopping is, dry hopping is?
Yeah. Well, late
and like a whirlpool chiller that I used to use. That also, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the purpose, I guess, is like this is a period when the brewer is trying to concentrate the trub in the center so they can draw clearer wort to the fermenter, or to the chiller and to the fermenter.
You don't
and so it's a period of hot exposure for that, where they add hops.
Right.
And then dry hopping, of course, is cold side after chilling. And traditionally happens at the after fermentation, but more and more we're seeing it done during fermenting. You know, where do we add the hops? Why do we make these distinctions in scheduling? Right.
Why does the timing really matter between these things? What is the major difference you're going to get on those?
Yeah. Well, I think there's two areas. One is your IBUs change as a result of when you hop. And the second is biotransformation of hop compounds, during fermentation, after fermentation. And
biotransformation is when the yeast are affecting the compounds that are in the hops and converting them to something that has a different, perhaps more or less pleasant aroma or flavor. Right.
That's it's an interaction of the yeast and the hops to produce different compounds that weren't there previously.
Right. Well, and there's another kind of is it a chemical transformation, or maybe you call it a biotransformation, where the compounds come out of the hops in the boil, and then the heat, or also in the whirlpool, the heat transforms those compounds into something more bitter.
That's right.
And also, I would assume, alters the flavor or aroma of some of those compounds as well.
Yeah. There's all kinds of chemistry going on during the boil, during whirlpool, and during fermentation.
Right.
And sometimes it's a case of volatiles being evolved from the hot wort. Other cases, it's high temperature oxidation, changing a hydrocarbon in the hop oil to an epoxide, and we'll probably talk about that a little later. That's one of the characters that's associated with noble hop aroma. Variety of things going on.
But we mainly in the past have thought about bittering as the boil hop, and even the later. We knew the later editions also added bittering, and I know for a fact that in the whirlpool, just sitting above 175 Fahrenheit, 180 Fahrenheit, it is those compounds are becoming more bitter. with time, just like in the boil. Maybe not quite as rapidly, but they are becoming bitter. Now, but the concept of bittering, and I think we touched on this maybe a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I don't believe in IBUs anymore. I mean, I believe they exist. I believe they do measure something. I believe what they measure is useless now.
Okay.
I think that the bitter perception of a beer is so much more tied into other things now, other compounds,
sensory
other flavors,
as opposed to number.
Yes, and I think the number that we're measuring, it's really pretty useless because, the malt balance in something, what the yeast have done, the water profile, all that really affects how intensely the bittering tastes versus whatever number. I could make a 100 IBU beer that measures out once fermentation's done, everything is like 85 IBU, and it doesn't taste bitter at all. And I could make one that is 20 IBU and tastes very bitter.
Yeah, that's right.
So
that's right.
I mean, but why is that? I mean, what's going on there with the measurement of IBU these days? And am I right? Okay. Should we just forget about it? Just skip it? That is a valid point of view. I think that to throw an analogy in there, perhaps it's like your cholesterol number when you go to the doctor. Mm-hmm. As we learn more and more about how cholesterol and our heart disease and so on works, maybe your HDL and your LDL and your good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, good fats, bad fats, the average person gets lost in that and says, "Oh, screw it, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing." Mm-hmm. But if you understand, I guess in this case from a doctor's point of view, what those numbers are telling you, it's still a useful number. Mm-hmm. And so in a like sense, I think the IBU, if you understand where that number comes from and what the test is measuring, mm-hmm. and you look at the beer style that the number is reporting on, it tells you a fair amount about the beer. But you do have to dig into it a little bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my concern is that people, have focused on IBU, and they focus on anything that they can is quantitative that they can put a number on, and then they think, well, that's what the beer is going to taste like. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, how much crystal malts are you using? What's the final gravity? What kind of yeast did you use? That makes a huge difference. What was your starting gravity? How about your water? Did you use a lot of gypsum? Did you use a lot of chalk? Is it a sour beer? Is it, all these things just play such a huge role in the overall perception that I see what you're saying. It's like measuring, color. In our lab, we measure color. We measure clarity. We measure IBUs. We measure all that stuff. But the only reason we're doing it is really more for consistency of our brewing. Yeah. We utilize it as signposts or markers along the path, and just like we measure pH of the fermentation, we measure the specific gravity of the fermentation, and we track those. And it's not that we want it to be at a certain pH at the the pH is dropping through fermentation. It's an indicator that we're using to make sure we're going the right path. Same thing on the IBUs, right?
Right. Yeah, it's a matter of benchmarks for quality, mm-hmm. And I think, the IBU, and we've, as you said, we've talked about this before, it is a number. It's a simple test that you take a sample of beer, you do a solvent extraction on it, which helps separate out these chemically similar compounds to isoalpha acid. You shine a light through it of a specific wavelength, and you measure how much light is absorbed. Mm-hmm. And then you multiply that number by 50. And so, when the unit was developed in the 1950s and the method was developed, beers were much simpler, and it was a good correlation But with the change in hopping and the change in the constituents that make up the typical IBU these days, I mean, it's a lot more variety. So I guess to take a step back, what is an IBU? Well, again, it's that light absorption times 50. But in terms of our perception, we're trying to measure isoalpha acid, which is our benchmark, our baseline for what is bitter. And we consider 1 ppm of isoalpha acid, as you would measure it by HPLC or a very specific test, to be 1 unit of bitterness, or that's 100% bitter, is that one isoalpha acid. But when you actually measure isoalpha acid with the IBU test, and anytime any brewery is stating IBUs, they're talking about this standard test.
Well, and the interesting thing is, the vast majority of breweries never test for IBU. I guarantee that.
Okay, they do it once for labeling, and that's it?
No. This is just calculated. It's just a homebrew calculation. That's the vast majority of brewers, because if you're not set up for it, even if you're set up for it, it's a bit of a pain in the butt to do.
Okay.
And working with the solvents and stuff, and then the vast majority of breweries, especially in the United States and around the world that I've ever been to, none of them have the equipment to do it.
Okay.
So they could send it out, but then they don't want to pay somebody to test it. There's no requirement.
And then find out the wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no labeling requirement for IBUs anywhere in the world. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, fair enough.
So I bet you it's probably less than 20% of breweries actually measure it.
Okay.
Maybe 10%.
All right. Well, be that as it may.
Yeah.
The isoalpha acid absorbs at about 70%. Mm-hmm. So if you were to take a beer that is measured by HPLC, which is a more exact measurement method, mm-hmm. if it has 100 ppm of isoalpha acid in that beer, it would measure on the IBU test as 70 IBUs, mm-hmm. because it absorbs at 70%. Now, there's another bittering compound that's prevalent in hops, and these are the humulinones, or oxyalpha mm-hmm. acid. It's an oxidized form. It's a little more polar, very soluble, but not as bitter as isoalpha. Mm-hmm. It's about 66% as bitter as isoalpha. Mm-hmm. But it only absorbs at 54%. So if you had 100 ppm of the oxyalpha in solution and measured it with the test, it would only measure as 54 IBUs. Mm-hmm. So those are the two the primary bittering compounds in your beer. Mm-hmm. You also have your oxidized beta acid. You have your hop tannins, polyphenols. They have some bitterness. Mm-hmm. But those are very small, really insignificant proportions by weight.
Okay.
So,
well, let's do this. Let's take another break, and when we come back, let's kind of wrap up that concept of bittering, and most especially how in the brewer is going to control this utilizing late hopping, changes in late hopping. We'll be back right after this.
Learning to brew has never been so disgusting. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. So John, how the IBUs are measured and all that is fascinating, but again, home brewers aren't probably going to be doing any of this measuring. But how can they utilize this information to control what they're brewing? How can they change their beer for the better? What technique are they going to use in order to make these adjustments in the hop character?
Okay, great question. So the point in talking about what the IBU is and what it measures is so you understand that we're talking about two primary bittering compounds. You got your isoalpha acid, which is isomerization. It happens with time during the boil. And isomerization, of course, is affected by boiling temperature.
Or just anything past 175, 180.
Yeah, I mean it's a natural reaction. So there's a drastic drop off as you decrease boiling temperature. Mm-hmm. I think around for example, in Denver, where you're up at about 5,000 feet, you actually cut the isomerization rate by about 50%. Mm-hmm. Just based on the decrease in boiling temperature as a function of altitude. Mm-hmm. So you've got time and temperature that affects your isomerization. And this applies to the whirlpool as well. So now in the whirlpool, still hot, but not as hot as boiling, you're at a decreased isomerization rate, but you're still getting some isomerization.
Right.
Now, in addition to that, the hops have the humulinone or the oxyalpha, and this oxyalpha occurs during baling, processing and pelletizing of the hops. And it seems to be fairly stable after that point. It doesn't really increase with time. At least the studies that have looked at that have not seen any increase with time. Mm-hmm. And so this compound is less by weight than the raw alpha that can be isomerized, but is more soluble. And so it is a significant bitterness contributor when you're whirlpool hopping and dry hopping.
Right. Well, and one of the things we found is when we're doing hazy IPAs and such, you put in such a massive amount of such a giant load of hops into the whirlpool that you get all your bitterness from that, and you have to be careful that you can overbitter the beer with too much hops in the whirlpool, too much hops in the dry hop. You can get substantial bitterness. And one of the things a lot of brewers have been doing is adjusting their whirlpool temperature down first. So they'll recirculate it and let the whirlpool temperature drop, bring it down below 180, and then add their late addition hops into the whirlpool to, one, retain more of the character of it, not drive too much of it off, but two, not to add too much bittering to the beer. So, those are techniques that people are starting to utilize.
Yeah.
Right. Trying to reduce the overall bittering, and also some of that, almost cooked vegetable that you get from using too much hop leaf material at high heat. So that's one of the things that I think the home brewer can utilize. You can let your wort chill down, or you can run it through your plate heat exchanger and back. You can put a coil in and just run the water a little bit to knock down the temperature, stir it and get the temperature down below or around 180, and that tends to be where people are throwing in the hops now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And makes a significant difference, and it's not that hard to do. So I would suggest for the home brewers and the professional brewers that are trying to get more hop character into their beer, and they've tried using a lot more, and then they're getting too much bittering. They may try adjusting the temperature down as well, and see how that affects things.
Okay. Yeah. The one thing we should mention when it comes to whirlpool hopping and dry hopping and so on, well, really hopping all over, is the factor of hop rate. How much in terms of, pounds per barrel or liter, grams per liter, ounces per gallon, how much hop material are you putting into the wort at any one time?
Right.
Because if you go back to the Brew Strong show we did a couple weeks ago with Aaron Justice from Ballast Point, he found that hop rate, the mass of hops that go in, really affects the utilization, because a lot of this alpha and humulene and isoalpha ends up sticking back to that hop mass, as well as the other trub in the boil kettle and equipment. So the more hops you put in, there's a decreasing efficiency of utilization. So something to keep in mind.
Right. And also the other thing relating to that is fermentation. The amount of yeast, the strain of yeast will, you wonder why, if you've ever done side by side with different yeast, same wort, you'll see that some of them are much sweeter. Some are much more bitter. You would swear you use different ingredients in it, but what's happening is the yeast are, taking some of those compounds out, or they're leaving some other compounds back, or they're producing some other compounds that have a sweetness or a bitterness, and the overall character changes as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the yeast, of course, is the next big step in the production of the beer. I mean, fermentation is everything, as you said.
Right.
So the particular yeast variety that you're using, how much of it, whether you had blow off, remove the krausen entirely, all of that, all of these removal processes can carry away your hop compounds and change the beer.
Right. Well, and I think one of the things that is necessary to really perfect a beer is to brew it repeatedly. And it's one of the advantages a lot of commercial brewers have, although I guess they're not doing it as much anymore. But, it used to be that you brewed the same beer day in and day out. And by repeating the brew process a couple of times a week,
get consistent.
Yeah, you knew how to make little tiny changes, and you go, yeah, that worked, and nobody else really noticed, but you noticed, and you could do all these little things. So I think, that's another trick that homebrewers can use, and it's very difficult, like we're saying with IBUs or anything, to be able to just design a beer from day one. The average homebrewer being able to just come up with a recipe and decide how it's going to work. There's a lot of moving parts there.
Yeah. Very good point.
Now, what about also more about biotransformation? I mean, so in the late hopping, up through the whirlpool, you can adjust time, you can adjust the amounts, you can adjust the varietal, you can adjust the temperature. You can't really on the boil, but you can in the whirlpool.
Right.
In post-boil, you can bring the temperature down. So those are all the controls that the brewer can use to affect the overall flavor, aroma, what have you, body, bitterness of the beer. Now, what can they do in the dry hopping stage? What about more dry hopping? All this biotransformation people are talking about, and what are the controls there? What can the brewer do to make something happen in dry hopping?
Okay, well, again, the yeast has a large part to play, but the hop variety themselves and the timing of the harvest of that particular hop can have a great impact on the beer as well. To take a step back for a second, there's roughly 4 classes of biotransformation that we know of right now. And I guess one of those is kind of a chemical transformation and oxidation during the boil. Hydrocarbons converting to oxygenated hydrocarbons, epoxides, and so on. Then you have oxygenated hydrocarbon transformation by various biochemical means. The chemistry is kind of beyond me, but I've seen diagrams where you get transformations, for example, of geraniol to citronellol. that is a kind of a floral character to a tropical fruit character, is one example. And, a lot of this information has really only come to light in the last 2 years. Studies by, Oregon State, Japan, in breweries there. I mean, a lot of new information has recently come out on this. We have thiol transformation, again, by similar chemical pathways where thiol precursors coming from the hops are acted on by hop enzymes, freeing some esters and free sulfur compounds that can have very strong berry, tropical fruit, rhubarb, different aromas than you would get otherwise. The fourth one is a kind of transesterification, and within the hop oils, within these oxygenated hydrocarbons, there's a class of hop esters. And these are ethyl esters. And one example is, where's that word? 2-methylbutyl isobutyrate transforming to ethyl isobutyrate, which the ethyl isobutyrate is a pretty common compound in hops, and it can have a green apple to apricot kind of aroma. And so, again, this is interactions with the hops, and so the timing of your dry hop addition can have a profound effect on the aroma character of a beer. Last year at the MBAA ASBC Brewing Summit in San Diego, Sierra Nevada did a very interesting presentation on an experiment they did where they took a single wort, split it into 4 vessels. The control wort was not dry hopped. The next wort the next fermenter was dry hopped at the beginning of the fermentation, right, with the pitching of the yeast. The third one was dry hopped during the middle of the fermentation at day 4, roughly. And the fourth one was dry hopped after fermentation, after the beer had been chilled to drop the yeast. And they took these beers to their sensory panel, and as you can imagine, Sierra Nevada, it's a pretty extensive sensory panel, and they saw a really profound change, very statistically significant changes in the sensory profile of those 4 beers, going from malty to tropical fruit to a little less tropical, floral, and then finally at the end, the one that had been dry hopped after fermentation had a much more less fruity and predominantly more dank onion, garlic hop character than any of the previous beers did. So again, it demonstrates the effect of yeast acting on hop compounds,
right,
and releasing some of these characters.
I would say though that the important part here is their test was done with their standard Sierra Nevada ale yeast, which the choice of yeast makes a huge difference.
Yes, it does.
Because some yeast will do more of this biotransformation, some will do next to nothing, and how it isn't necessarily always exactly the same transformation for using different strains of yeast. And the other thing is, you could drop pretty much almost all the yeast out if you're using something like 001 or Cal Ale yeast, right? US05. But if where this has really become important is in these fruity, hazy IPAs, and most time people are not using that yeast. They're using a yeast that stays in suspension a lot longer.
A lower flocculating East Coast English yeast, something like that.
Exactly. So in that case, you chill it down to a given temperature. You're not crashing all the yeast out. You're not going down to 0 C. You're taking it down to maybe 62, and there's still a massive amount of yeast left and active. So in that case, at the end of fermentation, so one of the things that we've tried is we've done essentially the same wort, same yeast, and the last couple of days of fermentation was all the rage people were talking about, and then a couple of days later, and what we found was a clear perception of increased almost a bitter compound, and a compound that we didn't like with the few days before the end of fermentation versus after fermentation. And I wasn't sure, what was causing that, but with it's like so many things with all the hype that was surrounding biotransformation. Everyone's like, "Oh no, it's good, and everyone was just blindly doing it.
Right.
And I think the important thing to take away is that it could be a negative too. It isn't necessarily always a positive. It depends on the beer you're making. It depends on the yeast you're using. It depends on the hops you're using. It depends on so many various things. You need to do some taste trials. You need to actually see what it is, the result you're getting, and not just follow some advice that you hear on the internet on some load of a show.
That's an excellent point, Jamil. Because, it really, I was looking at another hops article today in Brauwelt where they compared 42 different hop varieties and the compounds that each carried versus the others. Uh-huh. And, there's so much variety in hops these days when some of the new ones are more heavily loaded on the these precursor compounds, these sulfur precursors, these ester precursors, and others have more of the free thiols and the free esters. And so, you have to understand your ingredients. You have to understand your yeast and your hops, and to get a better handle on what the biotransformation is actually going to generate. Is it a positive? Is it a negative? When do you have to time it, and so on? So, I wholeheartedly endorse your, trial.
Right. Well,
just, your ingredients, your beers.
And I think that this is an area where people can, do some research. I mean, there's potentially, millions of combinations of hops, yeast strains, timing, temperature, pitching rates, waters, things that I think will all affect biotransformation, and maybe some general rules could be put together from some of this, but it seems to me like just such a difficult thing. It's almost, I think the vast majority of us are just working blindly now. We're trying something, seeing if it tastes better, and then going like, well, okay, that worked. We're just guessing, and we don't really have any science behind which hop we're choosing and why, and what yeast and what temperature, etc.
Yeah.
And so, what would you say for the home brewer to? Everybody wants to get more dry hop character, right, or more hop character. That seems to always be the thing. How is the home brewer going to take this information and use this to improve their beer, to get a longer lasting, brighter, better hop character in their beer?
Yeah. Oh, it's like trying to answer, how do I win the lottery?
I'll give you the numbers.
There you go. So hop oil content is one factor, although it is not the only factor. The composition, the proportions of the various constituents within hop oil have a big impact on overall hop aroma intensity. But, so understanding that, you need to look at different hop varieties, ones that have fruitier aromas right off the bat. As you smell them, by rubbing, those would probably do better in dry hopping versus hops that don't have, say, a strong tropical aroma or fruity aroma. Those may be better utilized back in the boil, where different transformation reactions could occur on some of these precursors that could free up more aroma. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying is that understanding your hop variety and its constituents can help you just determine where to place that hop in the brewing process, hot side or cold side, beginning of fermentation, end of fermentation. I don't have any real good rules of thumb at this point. I'm still reading papers on a daily basis. It seems like, trying to get the latest and organize these. But yeah, a lot of these newer varieties, the New Zealand, the Pacific varieties seem to have more of these free esters that can give you a stronger aroma in the beer.
Well, and what's interesting, having traveled around, and you've traveled around quite a bit as well, when you taste some of the beers, some places in the world, it's surprising. One of the biggest challenges they have is sometimes getting good, fresh, high quality hops.
Yeah.
It's getting better, but a few years ago, you would taste something just like, man, I don't know what kind of hops you're using, but are you sure they were hops? And so one of the things I would say to the home brewers that are trying to make great beer is be sure of your ingredients. Like you said, a rub and sniff. Who doesn't enjoy a good rub and sniff of your various hops? And if it doesn't smell good when you're before you use them, no amount of biotransformation is going to make them smell better and taste better once you throw them in. It's not like
if you dry hop with them.
Yeah, it's not some sort of miracle, magic wand that's going to convert something that smells like ass into, something that smells like chocolate.
Right.
It's just not that dramatic an effect. And so, just make sure of the quality of your ingredients that you're utilizing. And then, sometimes more is not better. I think that's one of the things you were saying was, there's a, kind of a limit to the return on how much you can put in. A lot of it ends up coating the fermenter. A lot of it's lost in the yeast. A lot of it's just stuck in the hop matter.
1 pound per barrel is kind of like the benchmark everyone kind of goes with for, any whirlpool hopping, dry hopping, how you. And a lot of the hazy ale brewers will go up to, say, 4 pounds a barrel for a hazy. Mm-hmm. But when you go over that, Fontaine and Shellhammer were showing that there's a very quick decrease in the amount of return. Mm-hmm. That as you go over 4 pounds per barrel or 16 grams per liter, that you really end up losing most of what you try to put in. It just sticks.
I think that the modern technique being used now is instead of, so there's still people doing 5-7 pounds per barrel. We found we went up to the 4 and 5 and found we were getting less character.
Yeah.
And so we actually backed off a little bit, and the character improved. And one of the things is that a lot of people are doing now is they're using recirculation. So they'll actually just recirculate the beer. So I think a lot of this started with like the torpedo and all that idea of recirculating through the hops. Now people are just pumping the entire mess around in the fermenter and trying to just, loosen up the hops, stir it up so that it spreads freely throughout the beer, and you're utilizing more of the character in the compounds that you're looking for. And so,
that makes perfect sense.
They're calling them hop guns, hop cannon. Well, not hop cannons. I think they call them hop guns, and they call them hop something. There's a number of companies that have them. It's essentially, a hopper. You put your hops in, you blow CO2 through them, and then you turn the pump on. You circulate beer through, and it sucks the hops through, and it'll go through like a shear pump and chop them up, or whatever it is you needed to, and then you pump it back into the fermenter, and you circulate this for. They're saying 4 hours is the kind of the magic time, and then you turn off. You get to you need 10 to 20% less hops because of it. To get the same, impact, which is substantial. I mean, it's thousands of dollars. A lot of times, so.
Hops are money.
More and more so today. So I think those are one of the ways people are pursuing them. The whole thing about hop oils and all that. There was like this whole rush to get more oil, and I think it caused. Some of the hop growers to delay picking further and further, and it became, the problem is then you get that oniony, garlicky. It's a real skill knowing exactly when to pick the hops, so that you're maximizing some of these oils and some of this character, but not allowing it to convert over into more of the garlic and onion.
Right.
So
that's a good point.
That was a. And again, scratch and sniff your hops and see what you're getting, because you're not going to convert it. No amount of biotransformation is going to make it into something more delicious. Anything else before we wrap up?
I don't think so. That covers most of the bases I think we wanted to talk about. Late hopping, dry hopping, kind of, we're trying to maximize aroma and reduce bitterness in many cases. Know your ingredients, understand what biotransformation is and what it isn't.
Right. Yeah, people might try different yeasts. They might try different temperatures. They might try different timings of when they add it in. The biotransformation should happen fairly rapidly. I don't know that... you really need to add the hops at the beginning of the fermentation?
It depends. It depends on the hop variety that you're using and the yeast variety that you're using. But you can get. I guess the Sierra Nevada study showed that with their yeast, and they were using Cascade hops, they could get different characters, statistically different characters, and they repeated that experiment 3 times at each timing. So beginning, middle, and end. Right. They could differentiate them.
Well, there you go. So try different things. I guess that's what that means.
Yep. Have fun brewing.
Right. Yeah, that's the greatest part of brewing, is being able to do all those things. And I tell you, one of the greatest things is using good equipment, from companies like Blickman Engineering. Check them out, our fine sponsor, BlickmanEngineering.com. John Blickman, he's always trying to innovate your brew day, make things better, and keep you happy and hoppy. So until then, everybody, brew strong.
Brew strong, everyone.